audience. Welcome to the Australia Wind Energy Masterclass, depicting the future of energy. My name is Maul, Head of Content of Leader Associates, and your MC of today's session. From green power to green fuels, Power to X is seen as an essential pillar to convert the renewables and to decarbonize the hard-to-abate industries. While this novel concept is a hit in Europe, it also holds huge potential in Australia as the nation pledges to net zero. For wind energy players in Australia, Power to X also represents a new possibility that extends the boundaries of traditional power to generation business. But precisely, how to understand Power to X and what's the market potential within it? Today, I'm more than delighted to speak with Mr. Maul Hansen, advisor of the Danish Energy Agency and a world practitioner of the Power to X initiative. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Hansen and I'm an advisor at the Danish Energy Agency. I'm very delighted to get this opportunity to talk about the Danish approach to Power to X. First of all, we define Power to X as green hydrogen and other fuels derived from green hydrogen. We have big ambitions in terms of Power to X in Denmark, like you have in Australia. My presentation will focus around 5 areas. First, the Danish Energy Agency and bilateral cooperation. Secondly, our climate targets and political agreements in Denmark in relation to Power to X. Then I will explain the Danish strategy for Power to X. Furthermore, we will touch upon why we do have focus on Power to X. And finally, I will talk about how we see utilization of Power to X. On the right-hand side of the slide, you will see a picture of the Danish Power to X demonstration project named Brande Brint or Brande Hydrogen in English, where the green energy is coming from onshore wind, and you can in fact see a wind turbine in the background of this picture. But let me start out shortly to explain about our bilateral cooperation. We are working in a government-to-government relation, focusing on knowledge sharing with our partners. And right now we have signed memorandum of understanding with 24 countries around the globe. And on the side of these partnering countries, we also have a few minor cooperations going on. One of them is with the public authorities in Australia, where we have a very good collaboration on knowledge sharing on various topics related to the green transition. And you can then ask, why are we doing this? The answer is Denmark wants to be a front runner in the green transition, and we have decades of experience working in this field. For instance, on offshore wind, where the world's first offshore wind farm was commissioned offshore Denmark in 1991. But we are a small country, and we only represent 0.07% of the world's population and emit 0.1% of the global CO2 emissions. But our partnering countries represent 61% of the world's population and accounts for around 60% of the global CO2 emissions. Before jumping deeper into our plans for Power to X, I'll need to give a bit of background information on the Danish climate targets and political agreements, which already has been decided here in Denmark. First of all, we have a 70% reduction by 2030 target. It is compared to 1990 level, which actually is written into our climate law as a target. And then our recent elected government has set a new and more ambitious target in terms of climate neutrality by 2045. Our previous target was climate neutrality by 2050. We also have this target of 100% green electricity by 2030. And for the entire year of 2022, we had a share of renewable energy coming from solar and wind on almost 60%. And finally, I would also like to mention that we have a high degree of security of supply. Even we have a lot of renewable energy in our system. Our ambitions on Power-to-X started out in 2020 with a political agreement stating that the Danish Energy Agency should prepare a strategy for Power-to-X. This strategy was launched in 2021, and it is based on more than 20 analyses, totaling 500 pages. In Denmark, our politicians has also set a target of 4 to 6 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2030. And it has been decided that the Danish Energy Agency will launch a support scheme for the first national tender on Power-to-X, which we expect will be published later this year. It's also worth mentioning that Denmark has the ambition to have green domestic aviation by 2030 and the first green domestic route in 2025. And simultaneous, the Power-to-X agenda has accelerated rapidly. And you can see the red dots on the map of Denmark on the right-hand side of the slide. The red dots, they marks the announced projects in our country. And in total, we have more than 40 Power-to-X projects announced, and they are constituting more than 15 gigawatt combined. But let us move on to what do we mean when we talk about Power-to-X in Denmark. As you can see, we have renewable energy out here on the left-hand side of the slide. And we are focusing on converting green energy from e.g. solar PV or wind farms through this electrolyzer process into another form that has value, for instance hydrogen, which can be used for applications where electrification is challenging and has advantages in relation to storage and transportation. We see hydrogen as essential for decarbonization in hard-to-abate sectors like shipping and aviation, but also heavy transport and certain parts of the industry sector. If we jump into our strategy for Power-to-X, we have these 4 objectives you can see here. Objective 1 is based on Power-to-X to be used in green transition in order to contribute to our political set targets for CO2 reductions. But it also needs to be used where it is the cheapest option. Objective 2, focus on the regulatory framework, and incentives must enable the development of Power-to-X to a point where it is competitive with other technologies on market terms in the long run. Objective 3 is about Power-to-X production has to happen in a way where it creates value to the Danish energy system. It can, for instance, be that the electrolyzer plants can play a key role in our electricity system by consuming a large amount of green electricity when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. Objective 4, focus on promoting production of hydrogen and Power-to-X fuels in Denmark in order to support industry and export markets, which underpins Denmark has ambitions to be exporter of Power-to-X products and technologies in the future. But let us look at why Denmark are having such a big focus on Power-to-X. First of all, you might be aware of the different colors which can be blended and used for hydrogen production. But in Denmark, we are only focusing on the green hydrogen color. And it is where the energy source is coming from 100% renewable sources. And the reason for this is we have substantial offshore wind resources with competitive electricity prices, electricity costs, and a well-developed and well-functioning electricity grid. We also believe Power-to-X plants located near renewable energy resources enables a lower demand for grid expansions. And then we also have an extensively developed district heating network in Denmark, which enables utilization of excess heat from Power-to-X production. And with these very good wind resources we have, then we also have very ambitious plans for rollout of large offshore wind farms and energy islands. On the right hand side you can see an illustration of the concept of energy islands and how it could look like. On the right hand side you can see we have an existing island named Bornholm in the Baltic Sea, which we are planning to use as a hub for surrounding offshore wind farms. The wind farms will be located approximately 20 kilometers offshore the island of Bornholm, and the total capacity of the connected offshore wind farms will be 3 gigawatt. And if you look on the left hand side of the mainland of Denmark in the North Sea, we built an artificial island located at least 80 kilometers west of the Danish coast. And we'll connect several offshore wind farms to this energy island, which also will have interconnectors to neighboring countries. But it's gonna produce unforeseen and massive amounts of wind power, and that will create the possibility for sector coupling through Power-to-X conversion. I will finish off this presentation by talking a bit about how we expect to utilize Power-to-X. We can see the emissions are declining in certain sectors in Denmark, especially in the energy and utilities sector, and also in the industry sector. But further reductions in these sectors are limited, and they are costly. But we need to fulfill our targets for CO2 reductions. But that will require reductions in the hard-to-abate sectors like transport and agriculture. And we see direct electrification enables to solve part of the challenge in the transportation sector and in the industry sector. However, there are need for fuels in some segments many years ahead. In terms of utilization of Power-to-X in Denmark, it is only expected to be used where cheaper options are not practical, as Power-to-X will remain more expensive than direct electrification, where that is applicable. But Power-to-X will certainly play a dominant role within shipping and aviation, which is sectors we can't electrify. So we have a very robust potential in these hard-to-abate sectors. We are more uncertain on the use of Power-to-X in other industries, in the agriculture sector, defense, or other part of the land-based transportation, where we can use batteries, e.g. in electric vehicles. But we don't see Power-to-X play a role in heating or electricity generation, as cheaper options exists, e.g. large-scale heat pumps and district heating for space heating, or biogas for peak electricity production. Thank you very much for your attention.
First of all, thank you so much, Simon, for taking the time with us. Can you briefly introduce yourself, your name, your company, your role, and also your work relating to the Power-to-X industry?
Yes, definitely, I can do so. And first of all, thank you for having me here today. I'm Simon Hansen, and I'm an advisor on offshore wind at the Danish Energy Agency. As I'm working with offshore wind, Power-to-X is an interesting industry because it is well connected to offshore wind, and we need a lot of renewable energy in order to create Power-to-X. At least here in Denmark, that's our approach to Power-to-X.
Yes, certainly. Power-to-X is such a promising technology to especially the offshore wind developers, because it extends the boundaries of traditional power generation business. They can have more business opportunities from this new technology. Which sector do you see will first adopt the P2X technology or the Power-to-X products?
Yeah. That's a good question. In Denmark, we have a focus on using direct electrification where it's possible. So we see the conversion of power into green fuels to be in sectors we can't electrify. So it will be mainly be in the shipping industry and also in the aviation sectors. We believe direct electrification, for instance, for heating, is cheaper than using Power-to-X products for heating. So our strategy is basically to electrify as much as possible, and then use power to X where we can't use direct electrification. So that will be in these hard-to-abate sectors like shipping and aviation.
Yes, certainly. For the heavy transportation sector, especially shipping and aviation, they have huge potential for power to X technology. But nowadays, frankly speaking, the projects hasn't been widely adopted. So what do you think are the main issues behind?
Yeah, first of all, power to X and green hydrogen are brand new sectors, both in Denmark and in the rest of the world. So we lack a lot of legislation, e.g. in terms of environmental aspects and security issues. It could also be on standardizations. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of legislation. And then secondly, we don't have the required infrastructure for transporting hydrogen yet. So we need to build these pipelines and infrastructure. And then also in the case of Denmark, we are only focusing on green hydrogen. So the energy needs to come from 100% green sources. So it will also require a massive build out of for instance, offshore wind, or maybe also solar. But in the Danish approach, we have a big focus on a large scale build out of offshore wind, and we're gonna build energy islands in the future as well, so we can create these massive amount of energy, which will be required to scale up our power to X production.
Yes, certainly, because it's a new technology and for a market at its infancy stage, there will be some gaps that need to be addressed in the future. But the future is promising. How's the investment vibe in Denmark these days? As a leading country, I trust there will be a lot of new things coming on.
Yeah, we definitely see a big push coming from the market in Denmark. The industry are announcing new power to X projects, and they are getting bigger and bigger. So the investment vibe is really massive right now. For instance, in our strategy for power to X from 2021, we did set a target of 4 to 6 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2030. But we have already seen market players announce power to X projects, which is way more than this target. So yeah, it's really moving fast on this agenda, and I can also tell you that very recently we have seen announcements here in Denmark of both a 2 gigawatt power to X project and another project which can be scaled up to 3 gigawatt. So we are seeing the projects, they're getting bigger and bigger. However, it also has to be mentioned that many of these projects are still on a conceptual phase right now, and we have only seen a limited power to X projects which has reached final investment decisions. But it is also a brand new sector. So, but yeah, it's looking very interesting right now, and a lot of things is happening from the investor side.
Yes, and at this stage, which sector do you think is playing a bigger role, the government or the industry side? I heard that the Danish government is being very bullish in pushing forward a series of supportive mechanisms.
Yes, actually, we are working on a supportive mechanism, which will also be built in a tender, which we will launch later this year in Denmark, on a tender on Power-to-X. And it will be our first tender, so it's also very exciting. But you asked about the building blocks for Denmark to realize our ambitions on Power-to-X. I can say the hydrogen infrastructure is a prerequisite for scaling up Power-to-X, and it will be an important next step that could be a build out of pipelines between Denmark and our European neighbors, so we can transport the hydrogen, and also and we are looking into that as well. Currently, we are investigating the feasibility in such a costly infrastructure project. But that will definitely be a massive building block to establish this infrastructure. And then also another one will be reducing the cost of hydrogen. That will be important as well. And we expect to see a scale up of the Power-to-X projects in order to reduce the costs. We have seen the same in offshore wind, where among others a rapid technical development and the upscale the size of projects and turbines, etc., have reduced the cost of levelized cost of electricity in offshore wind. So I could imagine we will see like some of the same elements happening within the new Power-to-X sector, but definitely a focus on reducing the cost will also be important, as we also have a loss of conversion in Power-to-X projects, and then also legislation will be important. We need legislation and the framework conditions for this emerging sector to be built, to be created. So I think that's that will be some of the main building blocks here in Denmark. We'll be looking into.
Yes, and one last question to wrap up today's interview. If there's one advice or one call to action tagline that you could provide to your Australian counterparts, what would advice or call to action be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think cooperation is probably would probably be my advice. I think we can do cooperation both between countries, among others, on the required build out of the infrastructure I mentioned. It could be cooperation between the public sector regulators and also the industry, as we play different roles in this new emerging sector. And it could also be sharing knowledge across countries, partners. I know Australia is also very advanced in Power-to-X, and I think they created a national strategy for hydrogen back in 2019. So there's probably a lot of learnings around in the world, and it could also be very interesting for us to hear more about what other countries are doing and are thinking in this new industry we're trying to develop together. So that's also the reason why I believe collaboration would probably be a key word for me.
Yes, partnership is the key to propel the industry development. And that concludes our today's masterclass. Thank you so much, Simon, for taking the time with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.